Greetings, lovely people, and welcome to Fast Track Reviews, where today we're going to be looking at Doctor Who Series 1, Episode 6, Dalek. So, as you may already understand, this is not a typical Fast Track Review in the sense of it being a review of a modern or recent piece of media. Instead, this is a little bit of a revisiting or a retrospective, not in any real detail, but I just kind of want to talk about this episode because I find it to be one of the best in New Who, and the fact it came so early within the time of the revival, I think it is just worth discussing. So, the Doctor and Rose end up in an alien museum. We get a few little cameos from Cybermen and from Slovene and a few other miscellaneous aliens in the background. And in general, it's a very cool concept for an episode. An alien museum on Earth in, at the time what was the near future of 2015, is actually a really fun concept. And it is something I hope we do see in a lot more detail in the future. A similar concept, maybe even further in the future, maybe, a few hundred years into the future, seeing someone who has collected a bunch of various artifacts from throughout space and time, throughout the history of the earthly invasions, seeing a story like this based around a different alien, maybe a brand new alien, or, similarly, we could see something very similar to this, but with a Cyberman. That would be pretty fun in and of itself, but I'm kind of getting off topic with that. There are a lot of great elements to this story, and I will start off with one criticism, which I think a lot of people have made over time, and that is the title itself. Dalek. And there is a really good title right in the episode. With the introduction of the Dalek prior to us seeing it on screen, it is referred to by Henry Van Statten, the owner of the museum, as Metaltron, which in and of itself is a very good callback to what was one of the original pitched names for the Daleks. And beyond that, it is just a really good and interesting name that does insinuate something like a Dalek, but doesn't explicitly say it. And I do feel like Episode 6 of Series 1, while it was trying to, bring in people that maybe had not quite jumped back on yet, people that remember Dalek Mania, things like that, having Dalek be the title in and of itself, I think was a bit of a misstep, and I think having something like Metaltron or, I don't know, the Space Museum or something like that might have been a bit better just for holding that sense of mystery for a little bit longer, because, as the Doctor quite rightly believes, there is a trapped, tortured alien in this facility that he wants to help. The idea of it being a Metaltron, and the idea that, as an audience, you don't know it's a Dalek until the Doctor knows, would have been really interesting in the sense that you actually do believe in the Doctor's cause. Because as the audience, especially if you are someone who, potentially grew up with classic Doctor Who, you will know the word Dalek. And even just generally in pop culture, I knew the word Dalek when I was 4 in 2005. It was a word that was just everywhere in British media, regardless of the fact that Doctor Who hadn't been on the air in over 2 decades. At least, not in any real capacity. But yeah, it's very interesting that they decided to go with the title of Dalek, and if I was to make one major criticism of this episode, it's that they should have just called it Metaltron. That is my biggest thing. Just call the episode Metaltron. You have the big reveal of the Dalek. They did kind of ruin it in the Next Time trailer in World War III as well, which, is another story in and of itself. I do tend to avoid Next Time trailers for that exact reason nowadays. But yeah, this entire situation with the titling, it's my biggest criticism of the episode, and I just think it's worth mentioning that there was a title right there, Metaltron. It should have been called that. And yeah, moving on though, we get what is potentially the first use, or actually, is definitely the first use of what becomes a pretty common Russell T Davies phrase, intruder window. Obviously being, how did the intruder get in? Intruder window. The Tenant Doctor, 10th Doctor, uses that phrase a decent amount when, breaking into places. Uses it, especially in my head, it's during the Centauran stratagem, and there's just a lot of instances of that phrase being used. And to my knowledge, it is first used in this episode, which is very interesting in of itself, especially when it's not actually used by the Doctor. It's used by Henry Van Statten, which is a very, very funny thing, that it's not even someone talking to the Doctor, it's just somebody within the same, like, vicinity. It's not even, like, heard by the Doctor, and yet he goes on to use it. It's just a very funny, like, little timey-wimey little incident, in my opinion. But, yeah, with that being said, we get a lot of lore drops in this episode relating to the Time War, which obviously, you know, back in 2005 was a brand new concept that hadn't been explored at all yet. Things like, I had no choice coming from the Doctor, phrases like the coward survived, I'm alone in the universe. There's so many little things that just point out how, yeah, the Daleks and the Time Lords are gone, and they wiped each other out. That's the crazy thing in a lot of ways. And ideas of how the Dalek, like, fell through time and, you know, crashed, fell from the sky, was screaming, you know, fell like a meteorite, like a shooting star, whatever you want to say. It just, there's so many interesting aspects to how, you know, the Doctor, who, you know, at this point we're still not completely sure what his part in the Time War was, and then this one Dalek who presumably did fight, you know, we can assume it's a Dalek, it will have fought, being the last of their kind, the only survivors of this Time War, of this major event, is so interesting. Just going back to one of the phrases that the Dalek says, I am alone in the universe, so are you, we are the same. And the idea that the Doctor takes that, like, so to hearts, I suppose, and ends up trying to kill the Dalek. He tries to win the war, you know, potentially years. We don't actually know the time frame between the start of Series 1 compared to the end of the Time War. We don't actually know the exact amount of time that the Ninth Doctor has been around. And it's interesting to think that he has potentially only just wiped out both his, you know, entire race alongside the Daleks just to come across a survivor. You know, and like, this could be days or weeks after, or it could be years. We don't actually know how long the Doctor has been travelling for since he wiped out both races. It's a very interesting, like, idea to think about of just, you know, how long has he had to think about this? Is this still fresh? Or is this something that's been boiling up inside him for who knows how long? The idea that the Dalek requests to have pity and asks for help, begs for help in a lot of ways, is so counter to what you expect from a Dalek. Daleks are not creatures that really understand pity or fear in any sort of human aspect, and yet it begs for it. It absolutely it fears the Doctor in so many ways, and it's so obvious from the moment the Dalek knows that it has no chance of defeating the Doctor, you know, its weapons are not working. From that moment, it is so scared of him. Even before he actually attacks, the Dalek is not meaning to upset the Doctor. The Dalek is finally having a bit of reflection. It's actually, like, thinking about what it's done, about what the Time War really meant if, at the end of the day, there's one Dalek and one Time Lord, and neither are going to kill each other, at least from the Dalek's perspective. And there's so many little elements like this where I think it adds up to being such an interesting setup for what ends up being the entire revival's kind of main overarching plot until, you know, Chibnall, where it's all about who truly won in the Time War. You know, the fact that we had the 50th anniversary almost exclusively focus on that concept is kind of incredible, and this is what started it all. This was the first true, detailed explanation of what happened during that time. We had references, we knew there was a war, we know that the Time Lords had died. We didn't even explicitly know who the Time Lords were fighting, and in a lot of ways, Russell T Davies, probably writing those earlier episodes, didn't know either. There was an interview, I think, only a few years ago, during COVID, I believe, where Russell T Davies said that the Toclophane, were actually going to be the, you know, creatures that defeated the Time Lords, or that fought in the Time War, which, knowing what the Toclophane ended up being, would be really interesting, because that is humans from the far, far future fighting against the Time Lords. It's very, very interesting to think how that could have actually gone, and how, you know, the Doctor and all his deeds during, you know, the early series of the revival could have been pushed by the idea that he committed genocide on not only his own people, but the people of humanity that he loved, that he cared for, that he has fought for time and time again, and that he has chosen many times over his own people. The idea that that could have been the story is also fascinating in and of itself. But moving on from all those tangents, we are introduced to Adam, who I'm going to be honest, I never liked Adam. I don't think he's a good companion candidate. I don't think he's generally a character that should have ever even entered the TARDIS in a lot of ways. But he is, your generic genius, super genius, child genius, whatever, that has been given basically an unlimited tether and unlimited money and unlimited this, that, and the other by Henry Van Statten to explore all that, falls to Earth, all the different alien technologies that are found. And it is very interesting watching him interact with Rose, because Rose is so, I don't want to say self-assured, but she knows who she is, and she also kind of looks not down on those that would typically be above her, but because she is so, dangerously working class, it does really push the idea that, she witnesses this person who, has unlimited everything, essentially, and is a genius, and all this sort of stuff, and she's just like, but you're not living. This isn't life, what you're doing. You're just obsessing in this little dungeon about all these different alien technologies. Just a very interesting dynamic to watch. Adam is such a dork. I actually put that in my notes. Adam is such a dork, and I think he's fun as a one-off. I'm not going to discuss the long game in any sort of detail, but yeah, Adam as a character is just very one-note to me, and I don't love him in general. I don't think he's really a worthwhile character. He obviously goes on in the expanded media to have some crazy adventures of his own, but that's for a completely different discussion. Adam is just such an interesting character, but we're introduced to Adam. There's a bit of a will they, won't they with him and Rose, which the Doctor seems weirdly okay with. I suppose by this point, the Doctor isn't exactly, in love with Rose. I suppose that really shows in the fact that he just doesn't really care about, Rose potentially just picking up a boyfriend from 2015. It's a very interesting dynamic once again. But, Adam, he's a dork. He's an interesting character on the surface, but realistically, he should never have been able to go in the TARDIS. And I think that is really shown by the events of the long game, which, once again, we won't get into. But yeah, very, very interesting dynamic. I'm going to keep saying that because there's so many interesting dynamics of Adam. It is such, everything relating to Adam is so weird. But, moving on from that, just a quick side note about Henry Van Statten. He owns the internet. And Rose obviously points out that's ridiculous, but, is it really that ridiculous? We live in, reality where, technically, there are just a few individuals that, quote-unquote, own the internet, that most of the public internet is controlled by just a small number of billionaires. And I think it wouldn't be too far-fetched for there to just be one top dog, one person hidden from sight, hidden from public view, that does just pull the strings, that can just control kind of everything from the shadows. And I know that's a bit conspiratorial. That's obviously what they were going for with the actual idea of someone owning the internet and being able to control who's the president and stuff like that. There are some very fun little jokes there. Elements like asking why he should put a Democrat in charge, and the response is because they're just so funny. There's a lot of very quick political commentary in this episode that I don't think really gets touched on too much, but I think is very fun and really does just punctuate the entire environment of, the Doctor Who-verse version of 2015. There's a lot of questionable things going on, but that's once again very much for another conversation. Though I suppose it does bring us on to the idea that kind of overarches most of this episode, which is capitalism bad. We are introduced to the idea that alien discoveries are responsible for broadband, a cure for the common cold, which, Henry Van Statten obviously doesn't want to give to the public, because why would they do that when they could just sell whatever else to, make much more profit than just curing something. But, very interesting how we're just basically told, all these day-to-day things are actually created due to alien technology, and just there's a lot of elements like that where I wish the Doctor kind of pushed more into that of you shouldn't be using alien technology for this, that, and the other. Like, this isn't how this is supposed to go. He's very against it when it comes to, like, Torchwood using it, or even Unit. But then, suddenly, he's perfectly fine with this random, trillionaire or whatever, locked in a bunker in, Utah. Like, he's very happy for Henry and Saturn to be doing this, which is very interesting. The only thing he has an issue with is the living specimen, but even that, like, once he knows it's a Dalek, he's like, kill it. Just, there's a lot of inconsistency with how the Doctor acts in this episode, and that's why I've not really spoke too much about him other than his reaction to Rose and Adam. But, yeah, very, very weird situation. But, of course, the big inciting incident of this episode, Rose, being the kind-hearted person she is, witnesses the Dalek being, tortured, essentially, with a giant chain blade. It's a chainsaw, I know, but I like saying chain blade. And goes to comfort the Dalek, goes to potentially help the Dalek. The Dalek shows that it is dying, or says that it's dying at the very least, kind of shows a lot of remorse and sadness, which is very uncharacteristic for a Dalek. And then Rose makes a mistake, and despite being told that if you touch the Dalek you disintegrate, she goes ahead and just, gives it a little pat on the dome. It, burns her hand, not in any, real way, but with the hand print, whatever, the energy of a time traveler is given to the Dalek. The Daleks, obviously, in more recent times, run on the time stream. They literally function based on the passage of time and, the time-space energies and stuff like that. It's very sci-fi, very, it's not worth it to explain it in any detail. I also probably can't describe it in any detail because I don't properly understand it. But the point is, the energy of a time traveler is able to completely revive this Dalek, which then leads to the first use that, it might not be the first use on screen, but the first, properly grotesque version of the plunger weapon in use. We see the Dalek essentially zap the life out of the guy that was torturing the Dalek, which is terrifying in a lot of ways, because everyone jokes about the plunger weapon and the whisk blaster, but at least we see the blaster, the actual cannon, in use and just kill people, just absolutely just destroy everything in its path. The plunger is always one of the things where we kind of understand it to be an interfacing device, but we never see it used for anything other than maybe opening a door or controlling a control panel or something like that. We see it tear the life force out of a human, turn his head to, a shrunken head and stuff. It is absolutely terrifying, and yet seeing that for the first time was terrifying, and even now, I watched that and I'm like, oh boy, this is getting serious right now. It is an incredible effect, and yeah, as I say, to my understanding, to my knowledge, it's the first time I've ever seen that plunger weapon in use. It doesn't happen very often. We obviously see it a little bit in other revival stories, but from what Dalek stories I've seen from Classic, I don't remember that ever happening. I don't remember them ever using the plunger weapon for anything other than interfacing, which obviously the Dalek then goes on to do. It absorbs or downloads or whatever the entire internet, all of human knowledge. And, yeah, from this point, I don't have many notes because this episode just becomes a general Base Under Siege story. There are a lot of interesting moments within it, and I'll mention a few, but at this point, once the Dalek is free, it does just become a pretty standard story until maybe the last 5 to 10 minutes. And yeah, the main things I just want to point out are how cool it is seeing the force field disintegrating the bullets. That effect, and it's something that we do see every once in a while brought back, is so cool because it shows how powerful a Dalek truly is. It doesn't care about standard ammunition. You can sometimes break through with an explosive, or, certain laser weapons can break through their shield. We see it from even, Cyberman weapons can technically destroy a Dalek. It takes a lot. Don't get me wrong, it's not an easy feat to accomplish, but, yeah, some technology, it can destroy a Dalek. But then you just see standard ammunition being just disintegrated, just standard bullet casings just getting vaporized, and it's so terrifying to watch, because what can stop a Dalek then? And obviously we know plenty of things can, but that is a big deal of, we just witness as all these, soldiers, all these American soldiers, are just wiped out because, for the most part, they won't listen to the Doctor. The Doctor just gives them some good advice in terms of aim for the eye stalk or, focus your fire in certain locations, and the soldiers just do not care. They just ignore it all, fire freely, and all get absolutely destroyed, which brings me to one very, in my opinion, stupid decision, and I just think it's not very intelligently written, and this is, once again, one of the few, issues with this episode. The soldier that is, trying to get Rose and Adam, back up to the surface, or back up to where, Henry Van Statten and the Doctor are, just kind of decides to throw herself at the Dalek for no real reason. She has a handgun. That's all she has. We have just witnessed a bunch, like a dozen soldiers with fully automatic, SMGs or whatever they had, get just destroyed. And this single soldier, after watching the Dalek start to fly, decides that she's going to try and 1v1 the Dalek with a handgun. And it doesn't even slow the Dalek down that heavily, because obviously, why would it? Like, the Dalek can fly, the Dalek doesn't really care about mowing down civilians, never mind soldiers. And yeah, it's a pistol that she's using. It's not going to affect it. It's a very pointless death. And I don't really get why it was even written in. In a lot of ways, I feel like it would have been more effective if they'd all continued going up the stairs once the Dalek could start flying. Only for her to get shot in the back. And that makes Adam and Rose run even faster, and it really, it builds the tension, because this isn't someone who has thrown themselves at the Dalek. This is someone that is continuing to run away, and is trying to get away from the Dalek, but the Dalek doesn't care. The Dalek is still going to kill you, and I feel like that would have been a more effective use of that character, rather than just have her self-sacrifice for seemingly no reason. Like, there was no point to her self-sacrifice. She didn't get them any more time or anything like that. She just dies because she wanted to be a hero. She wanted to try something. She even says someone has to try, when we already know people have tried. A bunch of soldiers have literally died in the previous scene due to trying to beat the Dalek, trying to stop the Dalek. And it really just... It's a really pointless scene to me. I feel like it was not the smartest way to have that character be killed. And I completely understand if they didn't want anyone other than Adam and Rose to survive the Dalek. That's completely fair. I don't have a real issue with that. But they could have had the soldier that is escorting them die in a different way, where it doesn't just feel like she's pointlessly killed herself. And following on, we then see, and this kind of goes into my whole, the soldiers aren't actually listening to the Doctor thing, a massive room full of soldiers. The Dalek simply elevates, shoots the fire system, gets the sprinklers going, and then electrocutes the floor with the laser. And this is something that I don't think we've ever seen since, and I'm almost certain was never seen before. But apparently, the laser works like electricity when it hits water. It just creates an electric shock across all water in the vicinity, which is, once again, an absolutely terrifying thing, because does that mean that if a Dalek or a Dalek ship, rather, something a bit more big, just fired into the, Earth's ocean, anything within the ocean would just fry? Would just die instantly? It's like, because that would be such a major thing for the Daleks to use against humanity, is just wipe out the oceans. Make the oceans uninhabitable. Like, you can't escape in water, so, you either stay on the land and eventually get found by the Daleks, or you fly. And that would be a really interesting thing for them to do in the future, but they, to my knowledge at least, to my memory, have never done it before or since. This is the one instance we see this ability in use, and it's very, very interesting. But moving on from all that, eventually we see Adam, manage to escape, manage to get through the closing safety doors, and Rose is trapped to the other side with the Dalek. Only for the Dalek to not be able to kill her. Legitimately not. It refuses to. It wants to. It's asking to... not asking. It's trying to exterminate Rose. But it can't. It can't fire. It can't do it. And throughout the next few scenes, we just watch as this Dalek questions its existence. It doesn't know what it is anymore, and it kind of seems to understand that the fact that it was a human and not, say, a Time Lord that gave her... that gave the Dalek the, regeneration sort of thing from the Time Force. The Time Force. I sound like I'm talking about something completely different. But the point is, the Dalek seems to understand that it is Rose that did it. and also is so, once again, scared of what that means for it. And that, of course, leads to the Dalek letting Rose survive, letting the Doctor survive, letting Henry Van Statten survive, just letting everyone, despite everything, live. Because it wants to be free. It wants freedom, it wants to see the sun. And that is exactly what it gets. We watch a Dalek not necessarily become good, but decide it would rather just live, at least temporarily, than kill anymore. After we've watched it just kill dozens upon dozens of soldiers. And that is fascinating. We obviously get the explanation of, oh, it's mutated, it's impure, Daleks hate that, Daleks don't want to be impure, that sort of thing. Rose even, suggesting, isn't that better? That, the Dalek is more human, and obviously, to both the Dalek and the Doctor, that is clearly not the case. A Dalek that mutates is an abomination. Daleks don't like anything that isn't like them, and even if this Dalek is the last of its kind, it still doesn't want to be different from how it should, quote-unquote, be. And, yeah, we get the classic line of kill yourself, spoken by the Ninth Doctor, which is memeable to all ends, and very fun line in a lot of contexts. It's crazy that was able to be aired in 2005, but moving on from that, we do see the Ninth Doctor attempt to kill the Dalek. He pulls out a weapon, he, attempts to pull the trigger, but he just can't. And we then see the Dalek open up, reveal, this little squiddy boy inside, absorb the sun a little bit, just kind of enjoy the heat of the sun for a moment, and the Doctor breaks down. Because he realizes that this is exactly what the war has made him. A weapon. Someone to kill all of us. He's already committed genocide, technically twice. And, depending on what expanded media you've enjoyed, many more than that. But, this Doctor, at this point in his life, doesn't want to be the one who wins. He legitimately doesn't wish to be the person to end the war anymore. He's already seemingly done it once, at least from his perspective at this point. And he really doesn't want to anymore. And it really humanizes the Doctor in a way that we hadn't seen up to this point in the revival, at least, where he seriously just can't understand what he is anymore. He doesn't know, just like the Dalek doesn't know what it is anymore, the Doctor doesn't know who he is. And Rose even points this out, saying to the effect of, what are you? What have you become? To the Doctor. And yeah, it really is a poignant moment in the Doctor's story, and especially being this early, we're not even halfway through the overall series. We're only on episode 6 of series 1, and we're having this major of a change in the Doctor's perspective. Like, he truly doesn't know who he is anymore, and I think that is so interesting to look at. But yeah, we of course witness the Dalek do exactly what it was asked to and kill itself, and yeah, that is essentially the end. We know that Henry Van Statten's museum, vault, whatever, is filled in with concrete, though in expanded media we do find out that's maybe not as literal as it suggests. We know that both Jack and River at various points have visited that museum post the events of Dalek, and yeah, there's a lot of other little things in expanded media that kind of insinuate that realistically they just closed it off, they didn't really fill it with concrete in reality. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this episode, and honestly, it is my favourite of all the Dalek stories in New Who, and one of my favourites just in general across the entire franchise. I, of course, love Genesis. Genesis is one of my favourite stories. It's my favourite classic story, hands down. But Dalek is just such a good Base Under Siege story, and this is coming from a franchise that is full of them. Like, especially you look at, like, the 80s. The 80s is just full of Base Under Siege stories. That some of them are really good, especially the Sideman ones. But Dalek is just so good as a character study of both the Daleks, the Doctor, Rose. Obviously, as much as I don't like Adam, it's such a good reflection of what does someone that's already in this world, in this, modern day-ish Earth, but knows about aliens, how do they react to things like Daleks? How do they react to things like the TARDIS? Stuff like that. There's a lot of interesting elements in this episode, and I don't feel it gets discussed quite enough. It's a very good episode, and if you are going to watch anything from Series 1 from Eccleston's run, it needs to be Dalek. It is the best episode from Eccleston's run, and there is basically not a single bad episode in Eccleston's run as well. He is essentially the one Doctor in New Who that has a perfect run. And that's really how it has to end for this review, because I have blabbered on for over half an hour at this point in terms of recording. I'll probably cut it down a little bit. But yeah, Dalek is excellent, and I really do adore this episode to no end. The two issues that I have, the title itself, and then that one soldier who sacrifices themselves, they're the only issues with this entire episode. As much as I complain about Adam, and I'm going to keep going on about Adam, I'm sorry, but like, even Adam doesn't really take away from the episode, and it works within the context. I just don't think he should have become a temporary companion in the way that he did. But yeah, this is such an excellent episode, and I really, really do love it. It is a regular rewatch for me. I do enjoy it so much. And even, back in the day, I started with Smith. I started with The 11th Doctor. So I went back and watched, series 1 through 5, is it 4? For the first few years for Eccleston and Tennant. And one thing that always stuck out to me was I have the classic Dalek collection, which is all of the 9th and 10th Doctor's Dalek stories. So it's a nice variety of stuff. And the one episode that always stuck out to me, the one that I always went back to, was Dalek. It's such a good story, and I love it to no end. But with that all being said, I could sing the praises of this episode for days, for hours at the very least. And yeah, I think that's enough for this video. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like it, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss upload. Otherwise, comment below your thoughts and feelings on Doctor Who Series 1, Episode 6, Dalek. And I'll see you next time. Bye!
It's been a long week. I feel like I could use a vacation.